Two things. Boy, is it windy out here. I made a little boo-boo in this video. I didn't edit it out because, mistakes happen. I'm human, just like everybody else. So there's that. And then also, I don't know how I messed up the BT versus BX-21. I put BT on the box there. But I did some research. It says BX on the engine, and it is BX. So I'll have to fix that. Enjoy the video. Hello, and welcome to Nitro Talk. If you're into nitro engines, vehicles, anything at all to do with the nitro side of the RC hobby, I would really appreciate a like and subscribe. Thank you very much. We did some videos on the port match for the HPI RS43. Some very interesting videos. I think we got some good data out of that. But now we're going to do another video. I know we just recently did the RB BX video. This is another one here that very, very early on the channel I did take a look at this, but it deserves another look, a better look, and a better discussion on. Today we're going to be looking at this Novarossi BX-21 SBK intake chamber. Now, if you see the label here, I made that label with my P-Touch, right? I put the background there and I printed out all these to make this label for this. Did I just pull all of this out of my rear and decide what to put on there? No. I actually was able to find an original box for this engine, which was the older style box. This is a pretty older engine. But this is exactly what it said on the original box for this engine. 5-port, 3.5 cc, short stroke, BX-21 SBK intake chamber. All right. What is the intake chamber? The intake chamber is your boost bottle. We discussed this when we did the Nitro Gimmicks video. I believe we looked at this specifically. This engine has a built-in boost bottle built in to the rear of the engine. And this is, like I said, this is an older Novarossi, probably mid-90s or even early 90s. This is a few years back. I'm going to go ahead and start disassembling this, and we will start to discuss it. So I did run this engine. I ran this engine quite a bit, actually, for quite a while. I never ran it with the original head. I always ran it with an aftermarket head. I'll show you here in a second. This head is the original one, and it is gorgeous. It is unwrecked, undamaged, unused. So I certainly kept it that way. I never ran it on the engine. We will see that this has a lot of the older Novarossi idiosyncrasies. That's not the right word. The stuff that came, like, the thinner head button. That's an older Novarossi thing. The newer ones have a thicker head button on there. This is a standard plug. It is not a turbo plug. I'm going to go ahead and pull this off here. And now, if you look at the setup there, this is something I did. It's not how that was set up originally, and I'll discuss why I did that. Let's go ahead and finish taking this thing apart. Like I said, I did run this thing, and I got good results out of it. It was a great running engine. Do I think that having the boost chamber on it increased the power? I don't really know. It wasn't like it ran any better than any of my other Novarossi engines, but it did run fine. I've discussed the boost bottle before. I think it's pretty much, it's not debunked. I'm sure it does do something, but the basic fact with it is people don't run it anymore. People simply just do not. Yes, I did just stab myself in the hand. Did you see that? Sorry about that. I lucky, see that right there, a little hole. I hurt myself, my hands. I don't treat my hands very well. That was not cool. I don't, you know what? I definitely got to at least clean up a bit. So give me a second. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. I hope nobody out there is squeamish. Please be careful when you are using tools. This is, it's a tuning screwdriver. It's fairly sharp. I handled that the way that I normally would. I cleaned it off very well. I hit it with hydrogen peroxide. I put a little bit of triple antibiotic ointment on it, right? I held a paper towel on it nice and tight till it stopped bleeding. And then I hit it with some crazy glue. I glued it shut with some crazy glue. So that's how you repair. That's how you repair a hole in your hand from jabbing it with a screwdriver. Not the biggest brain move I've ever done, but I think most of us who've done a lot of working with your hands and tools, it happens every now and then. That's how you learn to be careful. Do as I say, not as I do. Please be careful. Please don't do that. Please don't stab yourself in the hand. But anyways, let's move on. Let's take a look at this engine. Let me see if I can get this last screw out. Didn't need to, that was me trying to get a good solid firm, which I advocate for, right? You want to get a good solid firm insertion of your screwdriver into your screw, but don't get overzealous and stab yourself, please. All right, let's raise this piston up, and then we'll remove our back plate. That's your boost bottle intake chamber thingamajiggy right there. Will this sleeve come right on out? Sure will. And we'll remove our piston and rod. And now this one has it's got a cut crank on it. This was how this engine was when I got it. It's not a threaded crank. It had a standard crank that someone cut probably to run it on. And the older vehicles a lot of times were set up for a cut crank. And then so you put that piece on there. But that's how it was when I got it. And so I just simply ran it with those style clutches. I think I actually have one in the box that I was using for it right there. All right, go ahead and unscrew this pinch bolt here. And again, every single time, screw up. Actually, I could probably just push it with my finger. Screw down, pushing out that pinch bolt. Engine, the carburetor comes right on out, nice and easy. Yes, we did stop the bleeding. We got glue on there. It's all fixed now. It's all better, trust me. All right. We got this thing apart. We're ready to talk about it. Take a look. Now, why did I make that? Okay. So the way this thing is set up, it does have the up there, right? So it was made both right here. So what I figured out was, got some pieces of fuel tubing here. Do I got a small one? Not really. So if I just take one and go from one to the other, right, it kind of sticks out a little far. I either got to pull it down real tight to where the edges kind of get bent, or I got to run it way up like that and it sticks out a lot. I didn't like those two options. So I came up with this, was take me a couple little L's there. Those are basically nipples that go on pipes, tuned pipes, and made that little piece so that I could run it really tight in close, right? It didn't stick out, but I didn't have nothing pinching or binding in the line. So that was my way of running. That's how these, now normally this is an integrated boost bottle that goes in the engine, but usually boost bottles were out separate from the car, so you would have the line running from the boost bottle. You have a line coming from the boost bottle to directly below the carb. Right below the carb throat is where this line is usually tapped in. That's where your boost tap goes into. All right, so we discussed that. Let's go ahead and take a look at that back plate. It does have an O-ring on it. It is pretty sizable. It's a pretty good sized boost chamber. I'm sure it's at least as big as like a standard size boost bottle. But yeah, it goes in, it comes out. It's got like some heat sink fins on it on the outside there. Nice piece of machined aluminum. Some schmutz. Got an O-ring on it. Most later Novarossis have a larger O-ring and it's set into a groove. This one is a little smaller and it's against the back plate. That is your intake chamber back plate there, Novarossi. Pretty cool piece. And then we could look at our crankcase. Does this have, this almost looks like this has a 13 millimeter crank. I don't know if I've ever verified a Novarossi with a 13 millimeter crank. Usually some of your older SHs have a 13, but most of the Novarossis I've seen were 14. Yes, it is a 13 millimeter crank on this older Novarossi. The front bearing has been replaced. I've replaced the front bearing. Looks like I put a, what's that say? MGM. Looks like a decent front bearing, at least. Steel pinch bolt on this. Now, so this one reads BX-21 and then 3.5 below it there. And it looks like this either has a serial number or a number that somebody put on this thing. Looks like 301245. Nothing on the other side. But BX-21 on that side, Nova on that side, and both 3.5. Made in Italy below on both sides. Looks like USA. I've never seen USA stamped on a Novarossi engine before. It says C01 USA. And on that side, 018, and then some that CE logo there on that. I never noticed that down there before on this engine. Your classic, good-looking Novarossi work on this thing. Nice all around. Exhaust ports, nothing too special in there. Not a lot of cuttage. All right, so that's our crankcase. Let's go ahead and look at that beautiful vintage head now. Looky there. Buggy up top. Got the Novarossi logo down there. And then there's like these step downs. You got a shine cut leading to a lower fin where it says SBK. Isn't that cool? That's kind of unique. Both sides have that shine cut coming down to the SBK on the lower fin. Isn't that sweet? Very, very nice condition, original. Green also. This is back. Novarossi did have purple stuff back in these days, but I don't think they had really adopted it as their color so much as they did later. There were different color Novarossi heads back then, and this one's a beautiful green. Just an absolutely gorgeous green. Sits very high. This is before they were doing a lot of low-profile stuff. This pretty much sits directly right on top of the engine, the head button there. But a great looking original green Novarossi cooling head. I tell you what, I'll go ahead and tell you, one of these days, eventually at some point, I'm going to have a website, and all this stuff's going to be for sale at some point in the future, right? I'm going to be selling off my collection at some point. I have a lot of cooling heads, right? And I'm going to be, don't get me wrong, I love y'all, and maybe I'll hook y'all up. You get like a discount code if you're a member of the channel, right? But the stuff's going to be listed for top dollar, right? I collected this stuff. I cherish all this stuff. And I'm going to, when I do sell it someday, I'm going to be wanting top dollar for it. This is going to be one of the higher end heads. I would say even right now, I'd want over 100 for this. I think this would be a pretty hard one to replace. I would value this at maybe 100 to 100 and a quarter for that head. I think it's pretty rare. Very good condition, hard to find. That's about the value that I would place on this. All righty. Let's go ahead and look at that head button. Again, it is a standard plug. It looks like it's been Todd turboed very well. Do I need to do another video on the Todd turbo? I think I do. My original video was a long time ago. Here's a good thing for y'all to comment. Have you watched, let me know, for those of you who are watching this, have you watched my video on the Todd Turbo? Do you know what the Todd Turbo, the concept behind it, is? I've been thinking about doing another video on the Todd Turbo, which is simply adjusting your standard plug up and down to where it perfectly matches with the bottom of your combustion chamber, just like a turbo plug does. All right. Let's see what kind of shimmage we got on here. Looks like we got a 3-piece nugget. We got an aluminum 3. Another aluminum 3. And a brass, is that a 2 or a 3? That's pretty thick. Copper, actually. That's a pretty thick copper shim. That feels maybe a 0.25. I've probably measured this before, but I promise I don't remember. But that feels in between a 2 and a 3. It's either a 2 or a 3. Let's see what we got. It is a 3. So we've got, oh, that one's a 2. I did feel, I thought one of those felt, that one's a 3. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting. We got a 3 aluminum, a 2 aluminum, and a 3 copper. 8, got a 0.8 millimeter shim stack on there. Let's go ahead and take a peek at this. We got some discoloration on this thing. I don't really like that. Down the lower side of our con rod there. Look at that. This thing is old. It says XS right there on it. Can we get a good view of that? XS right there on the con rod. It's not an R7 rod. It's before those days. It's very nicely knife edged. Got a beautiful knife edge on it. But yeah, some discoloration up here. This actually just looks like some dried, nasty fuel almost. Let me see if we can get a quick cleanup of this thing with some fuel. See if it looks better. Don't forget to always cap your fuel bottle. Don't forget to put your cap on there. Yeah, look, I cleaned it up a bit. Still got the stains on it, but it had some looked like some dry fuel. That looks like it's gone. Flat top, not a domed piston. Does have bypass holes on it. Not a very long skirt on it, just a little bit of a skirt cut out there. It looks very similar to an R7 rod, probably what became the R7 rod, something similar to that. Does not have the dog bone cutout thing on the bottom. So that's our piston and rod. We're getting a good view of that. One oil groove, just has one oil groove on it. Old school. Let's go ahead and take a look at now. I used to call this thing, for some reason, right? I used to refer to these two carbs as big blocky and little blocky, right? For some reason, without them next to each other to compare, it just seemed like this one had a bigger block than this one, right? The older one, the newer one. But then one day I set them next to each other, and the blocks are the exact same size. So I no longer call that one big blocky and no longer call that one little blocky. They're both just blocky Novarossi carbs. I got the original. This is a metal plate insert into there. So your newer ones, your little blocky, is generally molded with the logo, right? That's the RB logo molded into it there. But this one was blank and had a little painted metal plate with the logo on it that is glued into that cutout there. Pretty similar, but a little different, right? Got the newer one has the heat sink cuts on it. This one does not. It's smooth. This one is a 3 needle, right? So this newer one is just a 2 needle carb, but this older one does have the 3rd needle on it. Well, as you can see, that thing's been adjusted quite a few times, starting to get some wear on that screw on the end of there. A little bit of wear on that one as well. But this, carb did run great, work great. Got great performance out of the carburetor here. It's got kind of a reversed insulator. It's got metal on the outside and the plastic on the inside there. It's kind of, it still looks like the new one's just all metal. It doesn't have a plastic inner part there. So newer one, all metal, one piece. Older one, metal with plastic inside. That's the carb. We got to look at the carb there. Did we look at the head button? We checked the shims, but it does have indicator, right? So you can put it front or rear. Standard plug, and like I was saying, it's a little thinner than the newer Novarossi head buttons. All right, that crank. Let's go ahead and take a look at that again. Somebody had cut that at one point, so now it is a threaded crank, not a, what is it, IPS, integrated pilot shaft. Good looking cuts on this thing. Again, it's a 13 millimeter crank, so it's kind of small. Induction window's not huge on it. Nice little ramp coming into, come on. Nice little ramp right there coming into the intake window, induction window. Some nice cut on that wall there, you see. Pretty sharp edge on there. Both sides are cut pretty good, a little sharpness. We got no slug in here. We do have our shark fin. We're missing our shark fin on the RB BX-5R. But we do have our shark fin here on the old school SBK. It is opened up at the end, and it does have a nice fang, and it does have a little balancing hole, divot cut into it there for balancing, but no slug. Typical cut behind there. Does it have a date code? It just says 402. Some of these Novarossi cranks will have a date code. 402, that seems a little new. I guess possibly, maybe I'm a bit off on my dating. All right, so we are down to the sleeve. Now, 5-port. This one says, it's not just in the name, it actually says, and that's the original box said 5-port. So, I guess, yeah. Oh, and I wanted to mention, I didn't reply. I wanted to talk about, someone had said in the comments on the BX-5R, the RB engine BX-5R, they said the reason why it's a 5-port and not a 7-port is that these lower ones, which are facing downward, apparently those should be lined up with the bypass holes. Let me see. Yeah. So someone schooled me on this. I did not, wasn't aware of this. So thank you very much for cluing me in. So when you put this piston, how it goes, right? It's proper orientation. This is the rear. Cut out for the skirt is in the front. When it's in the piston in proper orientation, the bypass hole in the piston and this lower port down here line up with each other. So apparently the way that now, and don't get me wrong, there are still some companies do count those as ports. I promise you, SH 8-port, they'll call an engine an 8-port. It'll look pretty much just like this. It does, SH does count those as ports, but Novarossi does not. If they're pointing downward, right? So these two are your standard Schnurley ports. I'll get you a little better view there. And the air is guided upward by those ports. This bottom port, as you can see, is cut to where it guides the air downward, apparently through that bypass hole. So those aren't counted. If you did count, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This would be a 7-port. But since you only count the ports that are facing up towards the combustion chamber, it would just be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which works. So I think that, yes, they are correct, that's how the ports are counted. Going up, they're counted. Going down, they're not. They're bypass ports. I guess maybe that's a Schnurley port, and then that would be a bypass port. Intake / boost port in the front. Let's go ahead and take a look at this thing now that we discussed the whole port counting thing. That intake / boost port in the front is very large, very wide, and very tall, and with a very nice ramp on it. good looking intake / boost port. On the side here, we've got our Schnurley situation. We got a Schnurley port going up, bypass port going down, and the nice long line port, I kind of call that one, the one it's always at the rear by the exhaust, next to the exhaust. You got that long line style port there. Same on the other side. It's going to be exact, very good work on this. This is before Novarossi was putting the groove up here. It is tapered at the bottom. Got a nice little taper at the bottom of it. And our ports are ramped very nicely. It's a good looking sleeve, a 5-port sleeve with 7 ports in it. Looking good. All right, we got a really good look at the SBK, the engine with the integrated boost chamber or intake chamber. That one particularly has been cut, so we use a threaded clutch nut. Goes on it right there. Works fine. I've like I said, I ran this engine a lot with that setup. You know, it would be maybe interesting to see if I can find a 13 millimeter SH crank that will go in here to swap it out with an original. Oh, you know what? I'm glad I'm glad I remembered while before I killed the video. Anyone still watching? We looked at the video, at the engine, but I would like to also add all of its data into my book. So if anyone wants to hang out with me while I do that, we can chat for a bit longer here. All right, so I got the Dragon, I got the BX-5R, and now I've got the Nova BT-21 SBK. Oh, and that's also something I remembered. I believe it was SB without the chamber, but then SB. There was at least two different versions. It was either the SB or the BK without the chamber, but then the SBK with the chamber. I remember that. So it's the BT-21 SBK 0.21 engine. This list is all going to be big blocks. So we saw that we got a 13 millimeter crank on this thing. Carb, piston head button. I believe it has your standard 15 millimeter carb. Yep. 15 millimeter carb. Our piston, very carefully, 1664. Let me see. Piston, 16.64. And head button, 1660. All right. Sleeve and back plate. Sleeve is gonna be 19.49. You know, I believe, let me see. Yeah. So, of all of the engines we've done so far, right, this is interesting. All 3 of the engines we've done all of this measuring on so far, they all have pretty much approximately 19.5 millimeter outer sleeve. So, on most of these engines so far, no, you can't swap one piston with another sleeve, but if you keep the piston sleeve sets together, you can swap those in between the engines. This piston sleeve set will go right into the Dragon. It'll go right into the RB BX-5R. We did the sleeve, and then so now the back plate is 25.46. 25.46 millimeter with a depth. This one's pretty deep. With a depth of 16.13. All right, what else? Bolt pattern, I believe it's your standard Novarossi head on it. 27.25 is our bolt pattern. Yep, standard 27 1/4, center to center hole, opposite holes, bolt pattern. You know what, I'll just shorten that to BP. Bolt pattern, 27.25 millimeter. What else do we got on there? Oh, yeah, the bearings. So the last thing is the bearings. It does have your standard bearings. Front is your standard 19 by 7, 7 by 19. But the rear is certainly going to be a 13 inner. But I'm not sure what the outer is going to be. So I need to, this isn't going to go in there. I'm going to have to swap my bit on this thing. Take that off, put that on. This is the small block one. What the heck am I doing? This is for installation. I'm doing removal first at least. And I got to put the 13 millimeter piece on here. So that is the 14, that is the 13. And how you do that is unloosen this piece and then unscrew this piece all the way out. Take away the 14, put on the 13, screw it all the way back in. And then once it's in, replace that part, put the flat grub screw at the flat part. All right, so now we've got our 13 millimeter bearing remover on here. Let's see how quickly and easily we can remove a bearing. Oh, this thing was in there pretty good. Not anymore. All right. So there is our bearing. Yeah, look, we're already healed up. Look at that, all better. 13 inner, 25 outer, I guess, somewhere around there, 25. Look at that. I'm just so good at this stuff, right? We got a 13 by 20. Oh, you know what? Probably says it. Oh, it's got like an old Novarossi. We zoomed in good. I don't see a size on it though. 2124. It's got a code, but no size. Rear bearing is rear 13 by 25 millimeter. So that is the not the best rear bearing in there. Probably could use a replacement. All right. We got another engine for our books here with all of our data. And again, interesting that all three of the engines we've done so far, the piston sleeve sets are interchangeable. I think that's something that is going to be and handy for these big block engines when trying to find the exact piston sleeve sets. If you know that you can use another one, it's going to give us some little easier to find parts for these things if we can use different stuff. All right. Oh, you know what? Yeah, I did want to put that back in. Now that's the thing. There really isn't a 13 millimeter bearing installer for this thing. The 14 doesn't fit. So how exactly was I doing that? Is that piece is 13? Yeah. So I got a piece there. Or maybe it isn't. Is that the same size as that? Yeah, it is. That's a 14 millimeter piece. Is that one? No, that's the same as that. So yeah, there's no 13 millimeter specific piece to get this thing in there straight. You know what I mean? But, you know, we got the front inner race of that bearing at least should be holding it pretty straight. So I'm hoping that I can get this thing back in there straight. Oh yeah, seems to be going in pretty good. Lock her down. Nice and smooth. Where is our crank? Got to take that off. Beautiful. Crank in, rolling beautifully. So we got our rear bearing in. All right, we got to look at this thing. We added our data to our book. Anyone who's still hanging out, I really appreciate you spending the time hanging out, shooting this shit, talking nitro with me. You know what? I'm not doing. If anyone's still hanging, I'm gonna go ahead and throw this thing back together. Now this engine is retired. It is pretty worn. I think I pretty much took it down to the end. It was used when I got it, and I used it for a while. So yeah, like I said, it's pretty much retired at this point. So I'm not going to worry about getting a drop of oil on anything, because it's not going to be ran. It's basically, it's a collector. It's an assembly of parts at this point. I mean, it is a complete engine, don't get me wrong. And that head is absolutely gorgeous. But the engine itself is pretty worn. Maybe put a different crank piston sleeve set in it someday. That'd be a cool experiment, huh? Throw this thing back together, being careful not to scratch that head. Again, that's one of my favorite heads in my collection there, that vintage green Novarossi SBK head. As you can see, this has 2.5 millimeters. I had converted this back in the day when I was running it. I did used to, for a time when I was running a lot of Novarossis, I had converted pretty much all of them to 2.5 millimeter head bolt instead of the standard Novarossi flathead head bolt. Tighten this thing down good. Throw our carb back in there. Oh, you know what? That was an interesting thing. So the reverse carb, okay? You see how these are both facing front. So that, I would call that the back, right? The side with the idle stop screw. I call that the back. And I call the side with the logo the front, okay? You see how these are both facing front, but the slides are in opposite directions, okay? One of these is the reverse carburetor. So Novarossi calls one of them, it doesn't say standard, but it's like a number, whatever the number is, 10281. They'll have two identical carbs, 10281 and then 10281, and that's a number I just made up, reverse, and it's going the other way. The way this engine is set up, it is running, is it the wrong carb? Whichever. To run this in a buggy, right? To have the carb facing off, the slide facing off to the right side of the engine. That's how these are ran in 8-scale off-road buggy. To do that, the logo has to be facing on the inside towards the engine. So this engine originally was made with the slide supposed to be over here, right? I'm not sure which one is the reverse and which one is the standard. Probably that's the standard and that one is the reverse, because this one was first. All right. So go ahead and throw our back plate in again with our up, facing up. Yeah, the piston is up. Oh, this is non-interference. Yeah, it doesn't really matter on this one. But always, for good practice, you always want to lower your piston when you're taking off your back plate, just to make sure. Now, can I put these in without hurting myself? Again, please be careful, number one. Number two, do as I say, not as I do. Be careful and don't hurt yourself, please, when you're working on these things. We work with some fairly sharp stuff. This is a screwdriver. It's not a knife, but it's got a fairly sharp edge on it. We work with picks. They have a nice pointy edge on them. And yesterday I was working with my X-Acto knife, very, very sharp. So yeah, we work with some dangerous stuff. Just, again, please be careful. And if you do hurt yourself, take care of it properly. Put your, like I said, I put hydrogen peroxide first, running water. I hit it with a triple antibiotic, and then glue it up nicely to keep dirt from getting in there. All right, we got this thing mostly back together. Let me throw my little custom air delivery setup there on it. What do we have left? Throw that on there. That's pretty much it. That is the Novarossi SBK, the BT-21 SBK Nitro engine with intake chamber / boost bottle integrated into the back plate. A super cool vintage Novarossi engine. I hope y'all enjoyed taking a look at it. Hope y'all did. Hope nobody enjoyed watching me get injured. Hey, I got a laugh out of it myself, so why can't you? Put my little bearing set here back together. Thank you very much for joining me, hanging out. We'll see you in the next Nitro video. Y'all have a great day. Don't hurt yourselves.